Dot and Bubble.
Dot and Bubble.
I love the bit when he's like, it's another wonderful day in Finetime. Well, we are having a little trouble with the weather report.
Do you know that's a fun fact already about why they did that?
I don't, but come to it later. I only have one fun fact for this episode, so I hope you've got some more for me at the end.
Oh, I've got them in my head. I didn't write them down.
Okay.
So I'm just going to go from memory
behind
the scenes.
I can't do what you do then, which is you scroll to my fun facts while I'm reading them, and then you read them, and I tell you, and you go, oh.
Oh, that's so interesting. I've just read that. No, that's fine. I'm going to try and do them from memory, so they could be wrong, limited, abridged. Yeah,
that's okay.
It's worse than Wikipedia. Wholala. Never use Wholala as your source.
Honestly, never. How are you, Alasdair?
I'm very well. Yes, I am well. I've got a funny situation at the minute. I'm doing allergy testing at the minute. I'm telling everyone in the world about this, which means that they've put different dots of different potential allergens all over my back.
Any bubbles?
They're bubbles. I'm covered in bubbles, dots and bubbles all over me. And there's 100 different allergens currently applied to my back. And I'm kind of wrapped up in cling film. And one of these specific instructions is do not sweat. Do not sweat. And so I was trying very hard not to sweat in my flat that gets very warm and with essentially a massive piece of cling film attached to my back. So I'm just kind of staying very, very still.
Yeah.
I tried to walk everywhere today as slowly as I could. Just slowly.
You had the fan on under you right up until we started recording because of the background.
Yeah, I was
so bless you.
My window's open today, everyone. If you hear sirens, screaming, just ignore. Like everyone would do in their bubble, if you will.
Yeah. Exactly. You got to pretend you're in your bubble for this one.
Ignore
everything going outside. Well, in case you're new to Wholala, we are a Doctor Who podcast with a fun, fruity and queer twist. We discuss and love all eras of Doctor Who, particularly loving on those from our childhood, discussing all of our honest highs and lows, but with a generally fairly positive spin. We managed to get a little giggle at least.
A little giggle.
And if that sounds like something you're into, then we are here every single Thursday on all good podcast platforms. And right now, we are talking about season 1, the new season of Doctor Who, starring Ncuti Gatwa and Millie Gibson. And today, we're talking about Dot and Bubble.
Dot and Bubble. Wow. Where can we even begin with Dot and Bubble? That we've never had this much pre-episode conversation before going into a recording. Let's say that.
Yeah, literally. This is the first time. Me and Alasdair have had differing views on Doctor Who episodes in the past. Even last week with 73 Yards, the initial reaction was very different. I think by the time we came to recording, we'd both kind of gotten to a similar wavelength. Whereas this week we have such different views about just the episode. It's so interesting. I'm really, really excited to get into this one.
Yeah, this one we are probably going to be fighting with fists by the end. Just kidding. But it's going to be, it's going to be a good discussion. A good discussion, this one.
Yeah, exactly. Well, as mentioned, we're talking about Dot and Bubble, which is season 1, episode 5 of Doctor Who. It aired on the 1st of June, 2024, which is a mere few days ago, as of time recording, and it currently sits on a very healthy IMDb score of 7.5 out of 10.
Well, as always, we recommend you go back and watch the episode, but in case you missed it or you've already forgotten what happened last week, then we are here with an episode recap for you.
Exactly. As always, we say just go on iPlayer, go on Disney Plus, the episode's out there, but if you haven't got the time, here's a quick recap of the story. We open in Finetime, a city on a planet jungle entirely enclosed in a force-filled dome. There, we meet Lindy Pepper Bean, who wakes up and immediately activates her Dot and Bubble, this city's form of social media. The Dot creates a bubble of screens around her head, and she's immediately met with cheery greetings from all of her close friends. She starts to watch a dance video from her favourite influencer, Ricky September, but is quickly interrupted by a video call from the Doctor, warning her there are creatures in the real world trying to get her. She immediately blocks him and continues with her day.
Later, at work, she gets a call from Ruby Sunday, telling her she has some questions to ask. Begrudgingly, Lindy listens to Ruby, who asks if anyone is actually with her in her office. It isn't until she actually lowers her bubble that she realises none of her colleagues are at work where they should be, except one who is being eaten alive by a giant slug. She tries to walk out without using her bubble, but realises that without the navigation, she doesn't even know how to walk. After escaping the office and realising her world is full of these slugs, she runs to find somewhere to hide.
Back inside her bubble, she talks to Ruby and the Doctor, who try to work out why the slugs are eating some of the people in Finetime, but not others. Lindy keeps making microaggressive jabs at the Doctor, telling him that she thought he looked like the man she blocked earlier and that he's stupid and will get reprimanded. She explains to them that she was sent to Finetime from the homeworld and shows them a video message from her mummy, who looks surprisingly like Susan Twist. After trying to warn her close friends about the slugs, her Dot and Bubble starts to run out of battery. Just before it does, however, the Doctor tells her that there's a secret passage she can use to find them at Plaza 55.
On the way, she's rescued by Ricky September himself, who shows her kindness and helps her to escape the slugs. While she recharges her dot, Ricky learns that the home world has been destroyed by the slugs, with no survivors. He keeps this from Lindy, promising to save her life. While they try and access the door to the tunnel, the Doctor works out that people are being eaten in alphabetical order. The plan originated from the Dots, who've grown into a sentient AI and developed hatred for the people of Finetime. As it tries to kill Lindy herself, she sacrifices Ricky, telling the Dot that his real name is Richard Coombs, and Coombs comes before Pepperbean. The AI kills Ricky, and Lindy escapes.
She makes it into the tunnel where she finds a group of Finetime refugees plan to escape the jungle on a boat to own and conquer the land. The Doctor tells them that they could, however, come with him in the TARDIS to find a new home, but is soon faced with their true nature as they tell him they could never be seen with someone like him, and their leader asks them to turn away before he contaminates them. Despite warning them that they'll die if they go into the jungle, they said they'd rather face their own odds than travel with someone like him. They sail away on the boat, leaving the Doctor angry and stunned.
Well, we don't want to just get stuck in our own bubbles, so we've been making sure that you tell us what you thought of the episode. So we went to our close friends list, and this is what you lot had to say to us.
That was very on theme. Well done. Sammy said, "Love when Who wears its messaging on its sleeve. I love that we have to sit with a deeply annoying and ultimately abhorrent leading character because it's a challenge. By the end, I was like, damn, maybe those space slugs made some points."
They made several points, and I want a character options figure of the slugs that I can keep.
There are fan creators online who are perhaps making 3D printed kits of the slug in character option scale.
I'd love that.
I'm considering
if
purchasing.
If we could make them slimy and gummy as well instead of just like hard plastic, I think that'd be really good fun. Like if you could like throw it at a wall and it would like stick, that'd be great.
Oh, that'd be good. Do you know what? If Doctor Who Adventures magazine was still around, they would make a toy like that as a free gift.
They'd have done it. Oh, Doctor Who Adventures, where are you at, girl? We need you now more than ever. Alex said, a Doctor Who episode hasn't given me chills like this since Turn Left's labour camps. That's what they called them last time. Amazing episode.
Zach said, I enjoyed it. It's one of the few civilizations the Doctor has saved or tried to that probably wasn't worth saving. Especially Lindy. That look she kept giving the Doctor. Also, the way 15 reacted at the end was brilliant.
Grumpy Who said, loved it. And I love how it's obviously a critique of today's digital culture, and yet no one watching this said, I'm going to be using my phone less.
At Bantherboy said, I'll be honest, I don't know. I didn't not like it, but it also didn't really do anything.
Some very positive fan reactions there. Of course, there was a lot of discussion happening online that we'll get into as well. And if you ever want to share your thoughts with us privately, you can always send us a DM at Wholala Pod, and we will gratefully receive your messages.
Exactly, yeah. No, this was one that was interesting this episode because it was very divisive, but I feel like, I mean, I think we just get into our thoughts about the episode.
Get into it, gal.
Me personally,
gloves off.
When the episode finished, 10 minutes into the episode, I turned to people I was watching with and I was like, oh my God, I love this. Like, I went into it with such low expectations because it just seemed silly and it was like, phones are bad, social media bad. Like, it seemed like it was going to be that kind of episode. And I was like, I don't really have any expectations. And 10 minutes in, like, by the time we were in the office scene, I was like, oh my God, I love this. This is like horror. This is creepy. Like, this is really like subjective. It's like different than I thought. But then by the end, I was like, oh my God, I hated that. My initial reaction, which I don't feel as strongly about it in this regard now, I think, but my initial reaction was I really, really didn't like that episode. And I called you in a frenzy when you'd finished the episode, and I was like, oh my God, what was that? And you said something very different to me.
Yeah, well, first of all, you rang me 5 minutes before I'd finished. And I was like, I'm not done yet, hold on.
Well, then, I did say, I was like, are you done? And you were like, yeah. No. And I was like, call me back. And you were like, okay.
So I was expecting you to then call back and gush, and you didn't. And I was like, oh, which was so interesting. But at that time of night, I was like, whatever, it's 1 a.m, as it always is when we finish Doctor Who these days. So yeah, my experience of watching the episode was different. I did not hate the episode, and I've now seen it twice, and I do still like it. For me, I like the story. I think, like you, I had gone in with very low expectations, and I think that's why I sort of relaxed into the story quite a lot as well. And so I almost began to enjoy the nonsense of it, like the nonsense of the social media bubble, and her going, oh wow, while she whitens her teeth and does her teeny weeny polka dot bikini. I was starting to feel like, okay, I can get into like whatever the vibe of this is. And I expected it to remain a very goofy story. And then I guess what I did like about it is that it really flipped on my expectations for the story in a way that really pleased me. And I liked that the goofiness was partly a bit of a misdirect for what we thought the story was going to be, because we almost felt, I think, going in that it was going to be, okay, they're in their bubble, they're on social media. The point is going to be about how we don't meaningfully connect with other people and how social media is a bit of an act that we all do for each other and it's not honest. But actually, it was more about kind of this ridiculous pastel world and everyone being happy and positive all the time was actually a veil for a very dark reality and a very twisted society with very frightening foundations. So I liked that I didn't get what I expected. It's funny that you hated it for different reasons, because I think we both saw it coming and we just, I think what we thought we were going to be doing this week is going, that was a really bad commentary on social media. And I actually expected almost some kind of cancel culture commentary or something to be done really badly, and it obviously isn't at all. We're having a very different conversation now.
Yeah, no, exactly. It really, and I agree with that. I do like that it sort of subverted expectations and it wasn't what we thought it was going to be, because I'll be honest, the way that like it was mentioned in the giggle, like you talk and you tweet and you cancel and you do, I was like, oh, this is the direction we're going in this. And I'm glad it wasn't. I'm really glad it wasn't. I think they did something better with it than it could have been if it had gone in that direction. For me, I just feel like my immediate thought when I watched the episode, and I think we'll get into like details as we talk about the episode, because I do have highs as well for the episode. It's not, I'm not a complete hate fest. My immediate question, I think, when I watched the episode was, I was like, what was that? Like, I wonder what the intention was, and I wonder what the target audience for this was. Because I feel like it was like a weird mix of some heavy-handed is something I've talked a lot about Russell's era, and I feel like there was a lot of heavy-handed dialogue, which I do think was deliberate. It's not that I don't think it was deliberate. The stuff like, only this, we're not having any smelly old people here, only the 17 to 27-year-olds. I was like, A, weirdly specific number. B, again, it's quite on the nose. It's like there's ways I think that you could have talked about. I
found that very funny, personally,
and that's fine.
I was sitting as a 28-year-old with my 29-year-old boyfriend, and we both absolutely cackled at that line. But yes, I agree. Obviously, it's not subtle. I guess it depends. How do you read it? Do you enjoy it as a, or is it like, I don't know, that wasn't subtle. Yeah, I mean, it's not even that I was like, oh, that's a jab at me, because I was like, honey, I jab at myself. If you can't jab yourself, how the hell are you going to jab somebody else going to get a min up in here? Like, I'm not one of the people that was like, oh, they were mean about young people on their phones. I was like, it's fine, it is what it is. Like, I didn't mind that. I was just like, oh, it's a bit like heavy-handed writing. And I do think that then when we get into the real meat of the episode and we talk about the racism and the darker moments of the story, I do think that doesn't necessarily work in the episode's favor, which I'll get into in a little bit, I think. Yes, absolutely. So then it's important to say that discussing a story about racism, we are very attentive to the fact that we are both white men commenting on that story. So I can only speak to my experience, and you can only speak to your experience of how it was for us watching the episode and what we thought of that story. But in no way, obviously, are we going to be able to talk about how should this story have been told, what is the right way to talk about racism, and how should racism have been depicted on screen. So there's limits as well with what we're talking about, and in me having a positive reception to the story, that's not me saying, of course, that I think they got this absolutely right and I think RTD smashed it, because I don't think that's the case. And I think that a lot of people have very legitimate grievances with the episode, and there are a lot of great points that have been raised that as well you're going to go into, Sam, because you've been listening to a lot of those views as well.
Yeah, no, completely. I think for me, the most important thing that I have tried to do and that I would recommend everyone do is listen to Black voices, listen to the voice of people of colour, listen to what different people are saying about the episode, and also listen to different opinions, because some people loved the episode, some people hated the episode. And like you said, we can only come from this from the perspective of two white viewers. We understand that, like you said, our thoughts on this are limited. We are not a part of the community that is being directly affected by the issues and topics that are at hand here. what we want to talk about in this episode is what our experiences were watching the episode Doctor Who. And like you were saying, I have one opinion of the episode, you have another opinion of the episode. That is no comment on what other people thought of the episode. There are some people who I've reached out to ahead of recording this episode to see if they'd be comfortable with me sharing some of their thoughts on the episode. And what I found really interesting is, like I said to you, I came away from this episode really feeling one type of way about this episode, really not liking it. And then I've seen different views from different people online where I've gone, oh, I never really thought about that like that, or I didn't notice that. And I'm excited to sort of dive into that a little bit today.
Yeah. So I've got a few highs. I think it might be worth starting with the highs.
Yeah, let's go.
So my experience of the story, like I said, I was expecting something absolutely ludicrous and to almost to embrace the cringe to the point that the cringe is no more.
There was a moment where I messaged Alasdair before this episode aired, and I said, if it's that bad, should we just do Tooth and Claw?
I think with these sort of episodes, sometimes with what I thought it would be, you just have to lean in so heavily to the cringe that it's no longer cringe, and just kind of embrace it for what it is, and just say, sorry, did you say camp, until it's until it is camp. So for me, I liked that the protagonist's journey didn't go where I expected. I liked the stages that I went through with Lindsay, which was that we dislike her, she's an airhead, she's an idiot, she calls herself an idiot, we stand a self-aware queen. And then we start to root for her growth because it's what we expect in this journey, that she has to put down the bubble. Then she starts to show some emotion. She starts to recognize the situation she's in. Then she starts to learn to walk. She starts to kind of have to stand up for herself, and she tries to shout out to help someone else who's going to get eaten by a slug. I'm like, okay, maybe this is the way this is going. And then we begin to realize that she's not just spoiled. We get these clues that she's a bit of a sociopath, which says, I think this might be the best day of my life. And he's like, hundreds of people have died. And then she just keeps beaming. And then we realize when she sacrifices Ricky that she really is a sociopath. And I found that moment where, the dot flies through Ricky's skull and she just totters off really shocking. And then, of course, it becomes very apparent, if you hadn't already picked up on it through the episode, that she's also racist, and this is a racist society, and it's deeply embedded in that society as well. So I think I also liked a lot that this isn't really a story about social media. Like, it's obviously linked very much to this. I think really, though, the bubble setup distracts you from what the real message of the story is, because they knew we'd expect that moral story about lowering the bubble and that being sufficient to begin to redeem these characters, that maybe this is a society that would find their way again when they all lowered their bubbles and started kind of interacting with each other face to face. But on a deeper level, they actually have this very sick society. It's a very racist society. It's structured in a very terrible way. It's a very strongly class-based society. They exist in this elitist little bubble in a very literal sense. They've been sent off to this world of leisure, away from the home world. They've recently had to begin working a whole 2 hours a day, which would be ideal. And I think in the end, one thing that really worked for me was the question of what if you saved people who didn't deserve to be saved? It kind of comes back to what Doctor Who's done a couple of times, but not, I think, this clearly, or not this centrally, which is almost like, what if you saved someone who didn't deserve to be saved? But also, what if the wrong one survived? And I like that in this story, nobody makes it out alive, because we know that their boat, as they go off into the distance, is doomed. They're going to die out there. The Doctor tells them they'll die, they will. And the homeworld is gone. Several characters have been eaten alive. And right when they were on the cusp of escape, the TARDIS is within reach. There is nothing between them and the TARDIS, and there is no time pressure. They can step in at any time. It is only their prejudice that seals their fate. And they turn it down, and they hurl that abuse at their would-be savior. And I think that's for me what worked.
Yeah. No, that's completely fair. I do get what you mean about like it feeling like it like sort of you're going in one direction and it flips on its head. And I like how it can subvert expectations. For me, and it's interesting because I think people online, well, some people anyway, certainly didn't necessarily pick up on this. For me, the clues that this was going to be a story, at least to somewhat of a degree, I didn't know exactly what, about race and racism. I was getting hints from that from the very first Next Time trailer, where I was like, oh, that's weird. Like, all the people in her bubble are white. And like, it was something that I sort of clocked from the Next Time trailer. And so I saw quite a lot of people online saying like, oh my God, this felt like it came out of nowhere at the end. And then like people being like, oh my God, on rewatch, I've realized all of the microaggressions and stuff like that. And for me, I didn't necessarily think that it was a story that I thought was going one way and then flipped that on its head, because it was quite heavily peppered with these microaggressions, which I don't even know if I personally word as microaggressions, because they were quite like, at times it almost felt a bit caricature-y, I guess, in the like heavy-handedness that I felt like they were being delivered. And so when it got to that final scene, like there was a few lines that she'd say, and I'd kind of like tell my eyes to the people that I was watching with, and I'd be like, oh my God, like this is the direction that it's going in. And then when it got to that final scene, I didn't really feel the satisfaction. I wish I did. I didn't feel the satisfaction of like, oh my God, like that really, I saw online a lot of people talk about a gut punch with the final scene, and for me, I didn't necessarily feel that gut punch, because I felt like I was on that journey. I was like, okay, I know where this is going, and then it got there. And I think that is one of the reasons why I didn't necessarily connect with the episode as much, because and we'll get into like I don't want to specifically dive into the end scene right now, because we'll get into that in a bit, I think. But for me, it didn't really feel like the weighty end was as weighty, because for me that was the direction I saw the episode going the whole time, and I think that's probably why I didn't connect with it that much on that level.
Right, that makes sense. And I will say as well, it's been really interesting as well to see the conversation that's happened around microaggressions. There have been people that I know who have watched it and who are white who did not pick up on either very many of the microaggressions or any, which was really shocking to me.
Yeah.
It was very interesting to me that some people had missed those microaggressions all the way through. And I think the reason that they can is that deliberately through this episode as well, they've made it, as microaggressions are in real life, that they can be excused.
That's a very good point.
All of Lindy's behavior all the way through, you can say, well, maybe it's that or maybe it's something else. And so I think that's deliberate up until the last moment where we get that confirmation, which we also so rarely get in real life, that is what it was. And I think Lindy is presented as this airhead so that it sort of veils and creates excuses for how she behaves the way that she does, which is, I think, how some people arrived at the conclusion, I just thought it's because she was a horrible person. I didn't know it's because she was specifically a racist, horrible person. Which was, interesting to me to say the least.
Yeah.
What I think was potentially a positive outcome from that is I've also seen a lot of introspection happening for people who said they were blindsided by that twist. And if you will, recognizing their own bubble and being blinded to, sorry to say this, the monsters in the same way that Lindy's bubble blinded her.
Yeah.
So some people have had that conversation online, and I think that is a good thing.
Yeah.
But then again, I'm saying these conversations are lovely. I'm saying that as a white fan.
One thing I'm really grateful for Doctor Who, and going into stories in general, like I feel like Russell, when he took the helm of the show for his new era, he really said, I'm going to unashamedly and very vocally talk about the issues of tropes of disability, talk about trans community, talk about people of colour, talk about racism, and completely, wholly and unapologetically go, these are the topics we're handling with this new era Doctor Who, and I really, really commend him for that.
Yeah.
And one, I hope, I would say, positive thing, and like you said, I completely agree, we're both coming from this from the perspective of white viewers, a positive thing that I've seen come out of this episode is a lot of discussion about microaggressions and about racism, about hate and bigotry. And I don't think that, at least in the context of Doctor Who, these conversations would have been happening if it hadn't been for an episode like this right at this time. And so I'm glad that this has created another opportunity for these conversations to play out.
Absolutely. And we've got a lot more to discuss later in this episode as well about how those topics got handled.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not a complete hater of this episode. I do have quite a few highs. One thing that I thought was absolutely great about this was how they blended physical practical effects and CG. If you've listened to the podcast for a while, you'll know that a big bugbear of mine is when people go, oh, that's badly animated. And it's not that it's badly animated, it's that it's badly composited into a scene. For me, the two biggest visual effects sort of parts of this episode were the dot and bubble interface itself and the slugs. And the slugs, if anyone's seen the set photos, were these great big sort of costume builds that were physically on set eating people. And then they were kind of like enhanced with CGI to have like wiggly tendrils and slimy grossness. And I think both the bubble design and the slugs look incredible in this episode. I love when Lindy is looking through the bubble and it's like the little moving screens are sort of warping her face. And I love like when the elevator doors open and you can see the inside of the slug's mouth coming towards her. I think that visually, and I will say later about some visual things that I really don't like about this episode, but visually the special effects and practical effects of this episode were a huge high for me. I really loved them.
Absolutely. I think I'm trying to think if there is an example where they've really got it wrong lately, and I can't think of one that comes to mind. Maybe there is one that I'm forgetting that's really obvious, but there's not been anything where everyone went, ooh. But I feel like
I'd hope not.
The practical and visual effects, I think, in this era so far have been almost so solid that I think we're spoiled because we've stopped almost looking at, oh, the effects were better in that. Oh, they were not so good. Because they're very consistent, I think, as well.
Yeah.
Visually as well, what I did like, someone else pointed it out, I think, in their reply to us. They said the set designs were excellent, and I'd agree. I really like how we go from the pastel world of the bubble, and we have all the screens with their very distinct background colors. We have the outfits that the characters wear that are very distinctive as well, and they almost all coordinate and match nicely. And then we go out to the real world, and it's immediately more drab, and it's a little bit more reality, if you will, even though they're meant to live in this kind of weather-controlled environment where everything's lovely and they live in a paradise in the jungle. And then they go down to the lower layers, kind of the oldest parts of the city that were sealed, and they go down to these mechanical parts of the city and these old kind of tunnels, and they go down to the river. And with each layer, everything almost feels more tangible, I think. You go from these very like smooth surfaces and smooth desktops and all this very modern feel. It's almost like how Black Mirror always presents the future looking, all that like futuristic technology and clean wood and everything else that you get. And then by the time you get down to the very bottom, it's like you have the water at the shore and you have the rust on the doors and the colors have changed completely. And even Lindsay's outfit is getting cut, and it feels like it becomes more physically gritty as well as it progresses. Yeah. Which is interesting. It's almost like the facade very literally begins to fall away.
Yeah, even in the costume design, and I'm just gonna dive into my. Do you want to say I've sort of broken up my thoughts today in highs, lows, and sort of mixed. And this is my only actual like solid. Well, this is my only like solid low where I was like, there are no things I really like about this. The hair and makeup design generally, not really Lindy, so I guess it's still not a complete low, but the hair and makeup design generally, especially for all of the like supporting cast, I hated the wigs. I hated the bright contact lenses. I hated the glittery makeup. I thought it just looked so cheap, like the sort of space Jedward with the like bright wigs that look like they cost like £4.80. I really didn't like it. Really didn't like those, but I did like, sort of talking about your comment, that by the time they get to the lower levels and by the time they get to where the boat is, they're all wearing kind of like dirtier shawls, and their pastels all either muddied up or it's ripped or it's fraying. And I liked that comparison. But yeah, every single, except for Lindy, I think Lindy's sort of hair, makeup and costuming is great, but every other person, like all the essays on screen, I was just like, they're not nice to look at. Like Dr. P, like he's just not nice to look at.
No, he's
like,
not.
I'm like, viscerally didn't like it.
You know, I actually do know what you mean. There was something about, I want to say the character is called Emo Paul. He's not Emo Paul. You know, Gothic Paul. Whatever. Emo Paul. He, his hair didn't please me. Same thing. I mean, again, was it intentional? Was it not? I don't know. Yeah, I actually do understand that criticism. I do get that. I thought Lindsay looked great, actually.
Yeah, Lindsay looked great.
She always had very perfect hair. She looked very Barbie land. There was a point where my flatmate was watching and she saw Lindsay opposite Ricky in the real world and she was like, oh, Barbie and Ken. And I was like, it is pretty Barbie and Ken, isn't it? Even in Lindsay's kind of hairband and the way he presented. It was all a little Barbie land up in Finetime.
Can I also shout out as well, Pete McHale, who played Gothic Paul in the episode, was the first ever trans man to be cast in Doctor Who. So I just wanted to give Pete a little shout out there.
Woo! We love that.
We love it.
This is it as well. I do really like this as well. We've been getting some more trans actors in Doctor Who, which is fantastic.
I love when Doctor Who does inclusive casting, and I want to see more of it.
So another high, I will say, the musing in the ending was some of the best we've ever had. I obviously always notice the soundtrack because I go the next morning always onto YouTube and search Doctor Who Unreleased and then filter by posted in the last 24 hours and just kind of sift through everything that's been uploaded, because you guys work overnight and I love it. And there's people doing score recreations, and that's what I've been listening to the song that plays at the very end over and over and over. I've listened to it walking to work. I've listened to it in the shower. I actually adore it, and it added so much power for me to that final scene. What I thought was brilliant about it as well, the final song that plays, it's a marriage of the long song from Matt Smith's era when he's giving a speech to the giant sun god planet.
Mm-hmm.
And then Clara steps in with her leaf and she gives it all of her memories and yada yada. And then it goes into 15's theme, but it's kind of a darker, slower version of 15's theme. And one of the chord progressions sounds exactly like the Bond theme, which is people going, it's really Bond. And it is. There's 2 notes in it that are like, bah, bah, and it's like Bond. And I was like, oh, anyway. I love the Bond soundtrack as well. So I found it very powerful. And what I did like is that the lyrics that go with the former part of the long song are wake up, wake up, wake up on repetition for that part. So I like in a sense that it is actually one of the few parts of a soundtrack you can put words to, because they've had words before and it's the instrumental version of that and the lyrics for it will wake up, which I thought was quite nice. Wow, it's literally gone woke. But damn, Doctor Who gone wake. But I really liked that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree that I had the music as one of my highs in there. I thought it was fantastic. There was one moment where I returned to the people I was watching it with, and I think it's when Lindy and Ricky are sort of running down steps, like sort of moving more like underground. And the music felt really series 2 to me, like specifically series 2. Like I feel like series 1 was like kind of like a bit more like airy, moody, ethereal. But series 2 is very like dun 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 dun, adventure,
Yes.
adventure, dun 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 dun. And it really felt series 2 at points.
So I think with the character of Ricky, they wanted to almost make, I think, a white mirror of the Doctor, where he showed all the doctory traits,
right,
and show that Lindy was willing to follow this man with very doctory characteristics, even a bit of a Matt Smith floppy haircut, and wasn't willing to follow the actual Doctor, who almost said the same things. The things the Doctor said and the things Ricky said. I actually thought that Ricky was going to end up being the Doctor in disguise, and that was how they'd like found a way to convince Lindy to follow him.
I thought it was going to be a projection of Ruby instead, because I thought Ricky September, Ruby Sunday, like RS, it's like a month and day thing. I thought it was going to be like a hologram of Ruby, and I thought when she like jumped to go hug him, it was going to like a hologram or something. That was what I thought, which obviously got very quickly disproved. So I do feel you on that one.
Yes, I was convinced, and me and my boyfriend were sitting watching. I was like, "It's the Doctor. That's the Doctor. That's the Doctor," and it wasn't that in the end. I'm glad it wasn't that in the end. But I thought that's what they decided to do, and I felt very clever for a minute there. But I think what they did, I think, to really hammer the, comparison, was to give him a very generic hero theme to almost underpin his behavior. So you'll hear like throughout every time that Ricky speaks or does like a "I'll get you out of this, Lindy," his kind of hero theme kicks in.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really, really good point as well. I do think that he was probably written in to be like the archetypal Doctor-esque character, and I think that does quite well show the difference between her reception to him and her reception to the Doctor. One thing, just talking about Ricky, that I have found interesting in the online response afterwards is a lot of people are really like standing him and being like, I've seen some TikToks of people being like,
I know, I'm
oh
like,
my
don't
god,
do that.
Ricky, like you deserve so much better, love you, Ricky, da da da. And I'm like, you do realize this guy was a white supremacist as well. Like every single person in the society
all
is
of them are.
racist, and like
They all
just
are.
because he's like there and being nice and trying to help her and being kind, like, and yeah, I agree he didn't deserve to die, but like, don't stan him.
We only see Ricky show kindness to Lindy. Beyond that, we have no reason to think he's different to everyone else in the story. Some people are like, Ricky would have come. Ricky would have. We have no idea what Ricky would have done. And from what we know about this society, absolutely he might be an outlier. And that maybe is what was, maybe Ricky was the one who would have followed. We don't know. Because he was maybe the only one who was willing to kind of read books and learn about his past and actually become informed. Maybe that was
that was something that I also thought was very heavy-handed when he was like, sometimes I lower my bubble and I read. And she was like, oh my
book.
God. And I was like, oh, I just was watching and I was like, oh God. Like,
Yeah. It made sense for the story because he needed to know where to go on his own because he hadn't, I think, met the Doctor yet.
yeah.
I guess he wasn't overtly a dick to the Doctor, but that doesn't demonstrate in any meaningful sense that he wasn't racist.
Yeah, no, exactly. I did love, which I mean, just talking about Ricky and his interaction with the Doctor, I did love, as always, I love Millie and Ncuti's performances in this episode. I think they really, really amazingly jumped between really funny moments and really serious moments. And I love the bit when they both say that Ricky's really hot and they're like, what? Like back off. And then the camera flips. Because I was going to say Ricky never saw the Doctor's face. We don't know. But he did see the Doctor when the bubble sort of flipped. And we see Ruby do this amazing little hair flip when she sees Ricky. And she's like, oh
my God, when she like flicks her hair back. I missed it both times in the episode. It's only because I've seen it tweeted since.
Oh my God, no. It was like probably my favorite part of the episode. I do think, however, that it's probably Russell, because I was watching Ricky and I was like, this man is not that hot. And I do think Russell is maybe sometimes writing his type into a script. And he's like, this is the epitome of like sexy man. And I was just like, would the Doctor really be like simping over this guy? I don't know.
I also was like, he's nice. He's not an unattractive man. But I also was like, yeah, would Ncuti Gatwa be thirsting for this man in real life? I don't know. But anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we should talk about the ending because we have very different feelings about the ending. And in fact, a lot of people do. My flatmates didn't like it. I know people who really loved it and shared my feeling about it. For me, I found the ending quite powerful in a in the way that I physically reacted to the story. Every time on both watches that we approached that ending, I could feel my heart going faster. I could feel my body was physically more tense, knowing what was coming. Because I could kind of see us lurching towards it, and I could see the way they were starting to look at him and treat him, and I felt tense every time. And it was the Doctor's breakdown every time that really brought me close to tears, and that physically like sat with me in my stomach. And I think the way that Ncuti Gatwa performs this, the distress, the frustration, the bewilderment as well. And the bewilderment is a really interesting, unique thing in this as well, because the Doctor is a character that until now for hundreds of years has been white and now isn't, and has said things in the character's past, like, you know, the 10th Doctor has said, about just walk around like you own the place. No, it's absolutely fine. That's what I do. And he said that to Martha, a black companion. And I think now there's a sense of bewilderment and there's hurt. And there's anger that it is their own stupidity that's stopping them being saved. And then on the side, the other part that I think doubled that for me was Millie Gibson. While he's screaming and laughing, she's very consistently kind of like quietly sobbing through the moment as well. And she's not sure how to comfort him. And she's giving him a very gentle touch on the arm. And then she covers her face and then she turns away. That felt so real to me. And I just found the combination of that really, really powerful. And there's no soundtrack for that section as well.
Yeah.
It's just the performance.
Yeah. No, that's very fair. I think that was something that I didn't really connect with when I first watched it, in the regard that I could see us going to this endpoint. I kind of could see where the story was going. And I think I expected, and this isn't, to be fair, necessarily a comment as to whether they handled it well or not. I think I expected a kind of speech from the Doctor, like some kind of dialogue about it. And I didn't get that. Like I got like a visceral reaction from the character and frustration towards them. And then the episode kind of ended. And I think that left me a bit like, oh, well, like nothing really came of that. Something I didn't really pick up on, I guess, the first time I watched it was Ruby's reaction and how it was actually that. So there's a creator called JP Patterson who posted a TikTok. It's like 6 or 7 minutes about how much he loved the episode. And I'm going to play a clip of what he said in a minute. I reached out to him and asked if he'd be comfortable if we shared a bit of it on the podcast. And he said he was fine with that, which I was very grateful for. One of the things he said, it's not in this clip, one of the things he said as well is exactly what you said, that Ruby is there kind of quietly sobbing. And I really liked that he was saying about how this is the first time the Doctor has directly faced racism towards him, and he doesn't quite know how to handle it. Ruby, however, she has a black mother and she has a black grandmother, and she has probably been within the proximity of racism her whole life, and she pretty much immediately realizes what's going on and she's devastated, and she doesn't really know how to help her friend, and she's just sort of there for him, like patting his shoulder. And Ruby is there for him because she has seen this before.
Right.
And she hates that it's happening because she knows what it is. So as I was saying, one thing that I didn't really love is that we didn't really get like a sort of I'm the doctor kind of speech. We didn't really get a dialogue about it. And I was confused. And one thing I really didn't like is the bit where the doctor was saying, I don't care what you think about me. I don't care what you think. Just please let me help you. And I think my issue with that bit was that it might come across, because this is how I was reading at the moment. It was coming across as if they were saying like, I want to take on the burden. It's my job to take on the burden of helping you better yourselves. And I think that is a very difficult thing to do well, because it's so close to the reality of burdening Black people with the responsibility of trying to better the understanding of racism and teach white people. And I think that isn't something that should be implied. And I don't necessarily think that was something that was intended to be implied, but something JP said in his TikTok, which I'll play in a second, was about how this is something the doctor would do. This is such a doctorish moment to help someone who has done unspeakable things, to always be there to try and help people. And I'll play that clip now.
It is such a great commentary on class, fascism, racism, the privilege that people have in their lives, being able to just kind of like turn off the horrors that are going around them and live within their own little bubble. I really, really liked it. Probably want to hear my thoughts on the end scene. And it really worked for me. I really, really loved it. Like, the doctor having to be confronted with racism and experience racism for the first time, and his reaction to it, it all really worked for me. How he kind of like didn't really understand at first. It didn't click, and then when it did, he still tried to save them, because that's who the doctor is. Like, I saw somebody on Twitter talking about like it was annoying that it's another Black character with unending empathy, and I would agree with that if it wasn't the doctor, because that's who the doctor is. It's the same person who like looked at Davros after he tried to wipe out all life in the universe and still said, I can save you. So him looking at them and saying, I don't care what you think of me, I don't care what you say about me, please just let me save you. And then still being like, no, you're not one of us. It works for me, because that philosophy that the doctor had, that philosophy is everyone is deserving of life, like everyone deserves to be saved and everyone can be better, is such a privileged philosophy. It is such a privileged philosophy that the character would have if, they've been white for thousands of years. You know what I mean? I've been seeing a lot of people say that it came out of nowhere, but it only came out of nowhere if you were not paying attention. Because I clocked probably 5 minutes throughout the episode, into the episode, there were no people of color in Finetime. Like, it was all white people in Finetime, and I was like, that's weird. The episode really, really worked for me. I thought it was great. Yeah, loved it.
As I mentioned, that was from JP Patterson. He's at the third JP on TikTok and Instagram. He has a lot of other amazing points in his TikTok. It's about 6 or 7 minutes long. Please go onto his feed and watch that. But yeah, that little clip I just wanted to post there about who the doctor is and why they are so willing to fight for these people. I think that was something that made me see that scene in a different light. And I'm really glad that JP shared their thoughts on TikTok, because it just popped up on my feed and it made me think about the scene in a different way, which I was grateful for.
Yeah. But then I can also see the other perspective on this as well, which is that conflict between the character of the doctor and the lived experience of real people. And the complaint, I think, is absolutely legitimate about how this can echo, or you can read this as mirroring an expectation that people of color have some boundless empathy with racist people to try and redeem or educate them, which is what is problematic. And the way that, as well, we cannot expect people in the real world to respond to racist behavior with boundless empathy. And I think that is where the conflict comes in as well, about being able to read from those words, I don't care what you think and you can say whatever you want, is not an ideal that most people can live up to in their real lives, and just be expected to kind of just have endless patience for people in that way.
Mm-hmm. I think one of my sort of closing thoughts before we get to the final point in this episode that we have is, I've mentioned it before, that I feel like they sort of caricaturize racism in this episode. They make these characters, even in the scenes where they're not outwardly being racist, she's like, oh, I can't walk, I'm being so stupid. Oh, these smelly old people, and da-da-da-da. And like the way that they chose to write these characters generally, not just talking about race, is quite over the top and silly, and they're very bright coloured and they're very caricaturized. And I saw this worded incredibly well on a thread on X, which I'd like to read some of now. This is from Jenna at Lakaylee's Comet on X. And I asked if they wouldn't mind if we talk about their thread on the podcast. And they were very kind to say that they would let us. One thing I want to preface before I go into this is that I'm in no way trying to use different people's opinions to argue against each other, combat each other. There's a lot of things they said in their thread that I really agree with, and there's lots of stuff in other people's threads that I really agree with and have shown me stuff that I didn't think before and shown me different points of views. And I think it's really important to make sure that people aren't using points that other people have said as like a reason for their argument. They actually shared something on their feed, this from at I Can't See for free, that said, so far haven't seen many people listen to our critiques, but I'm sure at some point a white person will say the same thing, and then all of a sudden the rose-coloured glasses for this episode will be off. And I think that's something I really want to emphasise, is that these points here have been really made well by other people, and I don't want people to think that I'm trying to claim them as my own. But anyway, they put it a lot better than I did. They said, representing racists as cartoon characters severely underestimates the danger of white supremacy in real life. White supremacy is a system designed and constructed to be rebranded over centuries. It's not accidental. People aren't racist because they don't know they're racist, but because they do. They know the system that oppresses people of colour, black people especially, benefits them socially and financially, and this is why they participate. It's not stupidity, it's intention. This should have been seen in Finetime. This should have been the Finetime core, not Lindy goofing around because the arrows are gone or some shit. Human nature showed us racist young people that exercise this power because they knew this. They may be children, but they're still dangerous because of their views. Martha knew this. The silly tech-obsessed Gen Z angle erases this danger and the actual Gen Z white supremacy. Instead of the camp goofy tone, we could have gotten a serious focused episode. The slugs and millennial Gen Z social media silly distracts from what could have been the main theme of colonization instead of saving it for 10 minutes of exposition at the end and scattering microaggressions. I think they put that far more articulated than I could have put it, but I really, really agree with their thoughts. I think that the over-characterized characters in Finetime took away from... I wish it had been a bit more like The Witchfinders, Jodie's episode, where the Doctor realises that being a woman has sort of serious repercussions and it can actually affect them in the middle of a story. And I wish they had dealt with this a bit more like that and made that plot the focus of the episode, rather than, I think, trying to use it as like a, you thought you were getting this,
didn't see this
and
coming,
here's
huh?
a twist, you didn't see that coming. And I think that. I really didn't agree with that.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. That is a great thread. I think that's absolutely worth saying. And when I say, like, you know, I had that emotional reaction to the end, that's still true for me. That's the gut punch I got. But that's absolutely not me saying that this was the right way to write that story. And this, I think, really brings us on to our important final point, where we are very much aligned, which is that we have had 10 episodes of a new run of Doctor Who with the first queer black Doctor. And I can't say behind the scenes, whether that's true of every person that's been consulted or every script editor who's worked on it. But in terms of there being kind of the credited writer for all these stories, there hasn't been a single one for the first 10 stories of the new era written by a person of colour for Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor, which I think is quite shocking. And given that BBC Studios' Bad Wolf Disney is such a huge operation, this feels like one of the great failures of the era. Yeah,
completely. For this episode, because I knew we were going to talk about this, and it's something that I agree with you, I strongly, strongly believe that we need more diverse writers, both in race, in gender, in sexuality. And I looked on the credits for this episode because I wanted to make sure I wasn't sort of saying anything without checking first. And there were only 2 other people I could see credited within the script department, none of which were people of colour. And I think when you're doing a story about Ncuti Gatwa being the first full series black actor to play the Doctor, his first episode where he directly faces racism, which also coincidentally was his first ever scene that he filmed, I think to have that written without any people of colour in the writing team, or at least credited, just like how Rose was written by Mallory Blackman and Chris Chibnall, I think that is such a disservice to the character, to the storytelling, and I think it removes a real sense of authenticity to the story they're telling.
I think that is absolutely fair to say.
So I think my two big takeaways from this is that I'm glad that more people are talking about microaggressions and recognizing microaggressions and having open discussions about recognizing racism and the danger that that has. But my other big takeaway is talking about recognizing the need for more diverse people in the team making Doctor Who. I think if you're having a show, especially one with such a long history Doctor Who has, being led by such an incredible actor like Ncuti Gatwa, you need authentic Black voices behind the scenes to be able to tell the story of our first full series, Black Doctor, authentically. I love that we do get little hints of this within the character, like the Gallifreyan inscribing on the sonic screwdriver is a Rwandan proverb. Things like that. I want to see more of that. I want to see authentic stories being told authentically.
But then exactly like that, right? Like a beautiful detail, but we don't see it on screen. We had 73 yards, I think, was the first acknowledgement we had anywhere in the script that this is even a Black Doctor.
No, we had that line from Donna where she goes, "Do you come in different colours?" Oh, but this is my point.
Do you come in a range of colours? Yeah, Yeah, that was really out of pocket line, wasn't it? I think this is it. And you and I have said this because we've talked a lot about the queer universe. And we've said it's great when we have writers who can tell their own stories and their own experiences. And they can write that in a way that feels truthful and authentic into those stories. And it flows through the whole narrative then. And you're right, I guess kind of using it in this story as a bit of a plot twist, a bit of a plot device. For me, it felt like a powerful story. It really gave me an emotional reaction. But there's a lot that needs to be said. I think a lot of acknowledgement needs to happen as well about the way that was done. My final question is, how the hell were they going to make this an 11th Doctor Amy Pond story?
Well, you've led me so gracefully into my fun fact for the episode. My one fun fact for the episode. Russell T Davies revealed to the Radio Times that he actually pitched the episode idea for Dot and Bubble to Stephen Moffat back in 2010, but it was rejected due to technical limitations at the time.
Right.
I guess if they had done it in 2010, it purely would have been a phone bad, social media doom. I think that would have been the episode.
It would have been the AI's learnt to hate you, escaping the AI, and then maybe some reflection on the state of their society, but without the racist element to it. Because this is also a really interesting thing that people have said before, is that any other Doctor wandering into the same story would never have known that they were dealing with a racist society.
Yeah.
And would have saved them and left. And how many times has the Doctor maybe done it before and never known?
There you go. Never known. Exactly. So yeah, I can't imagine it being 11th Doctor story.
So, fun facts. Let me try and remember any fun facts. Didn't I have one for you at the start? I teased one.
You did tease one. What is it? What was it?
Oh, I've remembered. It's the weather. So, a fun fact about the weather situation. Basically, they sat down to plan this filming block and they realised that they were filming the beautiful paradise of Finetime in January at the coastal campus of, I'm not sure where it is actually, it's one of the Welsh universities. And obviously the weather is not good. It was raining all the time. It was windy as hell. I assume freezing cold. And they wrote in, the weather systems are on the blink, as if to say, because of what's going on with, all of the slugs, things are out of control, like we've lost control of the weather. So this would ordinarily be, use your imagination, a lovely sunny paradise.
I love that. You know what? You teased me right at the beginning and there was a payoff for that. That was such a good fun fact.
At the very end.
I didn't notice the bad weather in the episode. The only time I noticed it was there's this production still that's clearly taken by like an on-set photographer of Lindy walking into the real hero of the story, which is the light pole. And I can see like in the freeze frame of the photo that it's pouring with rain. And I was like, oh, I never noticed that in the episode. So yeah, but I love that. What an interesting fact.
I know. And then I've just thought of one more fact.
Keep on coming out.
This is just me memorizing the behind the scenes clips. The slug can fit 3 people inside it to control it. And one of the controllers has to lie flat on their back in the tail of the slug.
I bet it's the same guy who operates the Daleks.
Yes. And I think that's kind of it for fun facts at the moment. What else do I have? Nothing else. Oh, I do have one more fun fact, which is really interesting. They talked about recording this, and I'm so curious to know how this all fit in with kind of Ncuti's schedule and sex education and how they had to kind of make things work. And I actually don't think they've done the worst job of working around the fact their main actor was unavailable for the start of the production. I think they've come up with some reasonable workarounds. With this one, obviously he appears afterwards via screen, so this was all filmed completely without him again, like 73 yards was, until the very end. And him and Millie sit in front of a camera in a studio with lights all around them, but they were reading off a transcript you see in the behind the scenes. And they say that as well, like, oh, one of the easiest days film we've ever had. We're just sat in front of a camera reading off a transcript. And I was like, that's a weird choice. I was like, did you not need to learn the lines for this one? So I don't know if they were just like, well, there's no need to learn them by heart.
How weird.
Or they did learn them and there was a prompt just to help them along.
Maybe it was just that Ncuti was so fresh into it or something that it was like, look, you don't have to worry about learning the lines. Because he literally finished Sex Education on, I think, a Wednesday and started filming Doctor on a Thursday. He literally one day to the other.
Yeah.
So maybe it was something like, look, we know you're coming straight from this. Don't stress about learning your lines. We'll have you come in and one of your first scenes will be reading off the teleprompter or something.
Maybe they're like, to make up time, we just need to film so much on the day that you will not be able to remember 10 pages of dialogue. So here's a little help.
Well, there you go.
And this will just allow you to keep looking at the screen without going, sorry, what is it again? What is it again? What is it again? What is it exactly? And now I think about it, there probably are one or two moments you might be able to tell that it's being read and not said. But I don't think it was too bad. No,
I don't think it was too bad at all. Well, look, we've had a couple of Dr. Light episodes, and like you said, to be fair, I don't actually feel this one was particularly Dr. Light. I know that he filmed all this stuff separate, but it was throughout the episode. It is full on Regency, baby. Next week, we're talking about season 1, episode 6, Rogue.
I think this will be a good episode, but it doesn't tickle my appetite. I don't know what I mean by that. I think I'm not a Bridgerton fan. And so I look at it and go, yeah, there it is. So, you know what? Low expectations are the ones I enjoy the most.
Yeah, well, I'm so excited. I'm not a Bridgerton fan either, but I'm so excited for this episode. I saw the SFX magazine cover with this, and it made me feel like good old Doctor Adventures magazine. Yeah. I love a mid-series Doctor episode, because I feel like the premiere and the finale get all this hype, and I love a good mid-series episode. So I'm very, very excited for this one.
I have got high hopes for the finale, so that could be a disaster. But we'll see. We'll see.
Well, before we get to the finale, I want to thank you so much for listening to this episode of Wholala. If you enjoyed it, please reach out to us on all of our social media and let us know what were your favourite moments from Dot and Bubble. You can reach out to us on our X, Instagram, TikTok and Threads, all of which are at Wholala Pod. And you can also listen to old episodes of the podcast on our YouTube channel, also at Wholala Pod.
Yes, and you can also rate the podcast. 5 stars is always appreciated. You can follow the pod to find out when new episodes drop. You can support us on Coffee, KO-FI, and you can share the pod as well with a friend or someone else you think might enjoy an episode.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next week.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.